Val di Sole, what a crazy place. I don't remember the last time I've had so many thoughts about one single race. The big first thing to mention, of course, is Michael van Toerenhout proving his prowess in unpredictable and difficult conditions. Puk Pietersen, meanwhile, showing that she is by far and away the most technically gifted woman in cross at the moment. And for once, the entire podium was presumably ecstatic. Alvarado finished second and was well deserved at that, and then Manon Bakker taking her second ever World Cup podium must be an incredible feeling. And then the men went and overshadowed that somehow, with Niels van der Putte putting down a brilliant performance to take second, with a splendid wheelie to go on about it. And then Kevin Kuhn, the first Swiss podium since Timontana almost a decade ago. Even the top 10, especially in the women's race, was filled with great names. Sylvia Persico was back and seemingly completely insane. She was close to what would have been, weirdly enough, her first ever World Cup podium. Lack of technique be damned at that. Honestly, with the marker she threw down yesterday, I think she could genuinely be a force to be reckoned with for the rest of the season. Magali Rochette also returned to the World Cup, and did so with her typically brilliant performances on ice, racing straight to a 5th place. I wonder if she'll keep that level up in the more traditional conditions, because we haven't seen Rochette at all in them conditions yet this year. But around all the great big happy stuff, there was also 2 hefty shunts. Both Elie Iserbyt and Fem van Empel crashed out of their respective races, with both, especially Van Empel, looking to be in a pretty bad way afterwards as well. And especially Van Empel's weekend brought up some questions about to what extent it's safe and responsible to race in a course like this. To sketch the situation properly, Van Empel crashed during the pre-ride, seemingly being a doubt for the race. She started anyway, and by the time she'd crashed again, it was still too early in the race to really definitely say that she was affected by the crash, but she didn't quite look her usual self, especially considering that she won here last year. We also never actually got to see the crash on the broadcast, but it seems she was trying to move up and did so out of the saddle, causing her to put less pressure on her back wheel, causing less grip. That then sent her spiralling into a bollard, and that led to the shot that we did see of her clutching her left leg. Van Empel was far from the only rider to crash. I think everyone bar maybe Marie Schreiber hit the deck at some point, and that in combination with Van Empel's crash brought up a bit of a discussion. Was it even really safe to race here? In comparison to last year, there was little snow, the course was far icier, making for some terribly slippy conditions, and if you did fall, it was going to be a rough landing. Honestly, I can see where the argument comes from. It's never nice to see people hurt, and the riders were really on their limit at numerous points of this course. However, on the other hand, you can argue that Van Empel's crash was caused by a fairly silly mistake that was theoretically quite avoidable. Now, I wasn't there, nor have I raced in conditions like that before, so I don't want to make too big an assumption, but I personally sit closer to the idea of Val di Sole being fine. The conditions are the conditions, and you've got to deal with them as best you can, and that includes being a tad more careful about when and where you overtake people in conditions that you are less familiar with. In all honesty, crashes like this just happen sometimes, and it's not fun, it's not nice, and it takes away from the joy of maybe the rest of the season if Van Empel's going to be struggling with an injury now. But you can't really do that much to prevent it. Although there is one thing that I would consider. I think the big lesson out of this for organisers is that having solid wooden poles on the course is a bit of a bad idea. Now, this is a thought I've had for a while, but Val di Sole seems like the perfect place to test it, due to the fact that it's of course both colder, slippier, there's more chances to crash, and things just hurt more when it's cold. Is it not possible to get some kind of barrier that isn't either a metal fence or a solid wooden pole? Because these hits for Van Empel and Iserbyt were both made considerably worse by the fact they hit these poles. Magali Rochette just about got away with avoiding one during the race too, and it's not only yesterday that we've seen this kind of fencing cause injuries. I recall Mathieu van der Poel hurting himself quite badly in Boom a few years back after whacking a pole, and whilst it's not necessarily cross, Wout van Aert ripping his leg open at the Tour de France 2 years back is always the first thing that I think of when I see those barriers. I don't know what the solution is, especially something that's cost effective, because let's be honest, that's the big problem here. But if you want to make cross safer, that's where I think your focus should be. Some kind of softer, safer barrier, or at least something that isn't quite as hard if you hit it directly. Even like some kind of little rubber bollard might help, although they can be quite hard as well. I wonder, am I the only one who thinks along these lines? Am I the only one who thinks this really is the big problem that we ought to be solving? What do you think? Feel free to leave a comment down below with your suggestions or an idea or something that I might have missed that could be the solution to this problem. Or do you just disagree entirely and think that in fact a race on the ice like Val di Sole is just too dangerous to hold? I'd love to hear what other people have to say, so please feel free to give your opinion. If you want to hear more cyclocross stuff, more opinions, more news, more anything that's going on in this little world, subscribe, come back for the next video, and I'm sure we'll be heading straight into the Christmas period with more than enough to talk about very, very soon. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.